Welcome to this videocast by ACGA Japan. I'm your host, Chris Wells in Tokyo. Today's interview is with Jaime Allen, Secretary General of the Asian Corporate Governance Association. The Asian Corporate Governance Association is an independent, nonprofit membership organization dedicated to working with investors, companies, and regulators to promote effective corporate governance practices throughout Asia. ACGA's work covers three areas: research, advocacy, and education. This interview was conducted at the offices of White & Case in Tokyo immediately following a press conference announcing the ACGA white paper on corporate governance in Japan. Welcome to Tokyo, and thank you for agreeing to this interview. Your press conference today was about your new Japan white paper. Can you tell us what prompted publication of the white paper now?
Essentially, after our conference late last year in Tokyo, we got together with our members and decided what we should do next, how to follow up the conference and how to promote corporate governance in Japan. And we came up with the idea of doing a policy paper focusing on the areas that we felt were most important in Japan in corporate governance and making a series of recommendations. And we put the idea to our members and they all loved it. So that's why we started working on it.
That's great. So what were the main conclusions from the last November's conference and the white paper?
Well, I think generally that corporate governance in Japan, although there has been some improvement in the last 5 years, generally most listed companies in Japan do not yet have sophisticated and developed systems of corporate governance, and that is affecting the stock market, it's affecting returns to shareholders and pension funds, and it's basically also affecting, we believe, the competitiveness of listed companies in Japan.
Your white paper notes that some of the assumptions about the role of shareholders in Japan may not be as well accepted as elsewhere, and that so-called stakeholder rights sometimes override shareholder economic benefits. Can you comment on that?
Well, essentially what we're saying in the paper is that we feel shareholders are not being treated fairly by most listed companies. Their rights are not being recognised, they're not receiving sufficient dividends, they're not being allowed to have a dialogue with management, companies are not being sufficiently transparent with regard to shareholder meetings and so on. So what we're essentially trying to do is level the playing field between shareholders and other stakeholders. We do recognise that other stakeholders, and all stakeholders, play an important part in companies, and we do believe the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders can be aligned, and that's an important part of the board.
You mentioned in today's conference that there are 6 major recommendations or points that are noted in the white paper. Can you tell us what those are?
Sure. Well, the first one is shareholders, not managers, are the owners of companies. The second one is about efficient use of capital, basically looking at companies not as cash boxes, but running them in a more financially disciplined way. Thirdly, providing independent supervision and management, because we feel that the Kansai system is not providing sufficient oversight of management, and that this is actually undermining the governance of companies. And then we make a series of recommendations regarding shareholder rights, relating to preemption rights, shareholder voting, and poison pills.
Okay. Did ACGA find any good aspects of Japanese corporate governance in its survey or in the conference?
Sure. I mean, we do mention in the survey some companies that have good transparency. We noted that Japan is the only market in Asia that has a functioning system of proper electronic voting. And we do feel that there are some companies in Japan who are reasonably open and are quite good at corporate governance. So we do try and give credit where it's due, but our recommendations and our analysis is focused on what we believe is the average level of corporate governance in Japan.
Well, the white paper seems pretty critical of Japanese corporate governance generally. What do you think the reaction will be in Japan?
Well, I'm sure the reaction from listed companies will not be very positive, but we hope that some of them do take the recommendations in the spirit with which we give them, which is that we believe this will actually benefit these companies. And we feel that there is quite a degree of support from many investors in Japan, intermediaries. The reaction we're getting in the last few days and during the white paper is that we feel that there's a greater degree of support here for these recommendations than is being publicly stated.
How does ACGA evaluate Japanese corporate governance versus corporate governance in other parts of Asia? Are there concerns in Japan that are seen elsewhere in Asia?
Well, Japan does share many of the same problems as elsewhere. Lack of transparency with regard to shareholder meetings, difficulty of having a dialogue between management and shareholders. The problem of not recognising shareholders as owners of companies. So many of the problems in Japan or many of the issues in Japan are similar to elsewhere. In terms of the overall macro system of governance, in our CG Watch survey of last year, 2007, we rated Japan 5th out of 11 markets in Asia. So essentially, and within that, we found enforcement quite good relative to the rest of the region, and accounting and auditing standards are quite good with regard to the rest of the region. But in other areas, we found Japan underperform.
So which countries in Asia were ranked above Japan on corporate governance?
Well, Hong Kong was first, Singapore second, India third, and Taiwan fourth.
Okay. So it appears there's some distance for them to go then.
Some distance, yeah.
Will it be easy for them to do that?
I think it's a mindset issue. We've been doing this corporate governance work for 8 years, and there's no reason why Asian markets or regulators or companies can't achieve world-class standards.
You had mentioned in today's session about voter transparency. That was a common theme, I think, about proxy voting and other types of voting in shareholders' meeting. Can you comment on that? What should be done there?
Well, the basic issue there is that the shareholding structure of companies in Asia has changed. So no longer do you have most of the shares held by domestic investors. You now have more international shareholding structures. So an individual company may have shareholders from their own market, from Europe and North America and elsewhere. And these shareholders are now starting to vote their shares. And they're spending considerable time and money voting their shares. So it's quite natural that they want to know what the result is. And they want the vote to be counted. They want to see the result. They want a proper independent scrutineer. So this is really just bread and butter corporate governance. And it's in many ways the easy part of corporate governance.
Tell us about how you plan to use the white paper going forward. We had the conference, now we have the white paper. What's the advocacy, or how do you plan to use the white paper in Japan or elsewhere?
Right. Well, I think with basically a three-pronged strategy. One is to take the white paper to government, to the key government bodies, to the Tokyo Stock Exchange and so on, and try and get the regulators thinking about the recommendations and the issues. Secondly, the issuers, the listed companies. And the idea there is that we will send the white paper to some companies, but more importantly, our members, the investors, will take the white paper. So we're going to be printing several thousand copies. The members will be sending it in soft and hard copy to their investee companies. And thirdly, talking to the media and other business and professional bodies, and basically trying to build a consensus of support behind these ideas. But very much that this is good for Japan. It's not just good for foreign investors, it's very good for domestic investors as well.
Well, I think today was a good launch. There was a lot of interest.
Thank you.
And I really want to say good luck with your advocacy, and thanks very much for coming.
Well, and thank you for hosting the launch today.